This is Community Theater in Middletown, and I'm the interviewer, Ed Strother. And today I'm talking with Martin Schwartz, the president of Schwartz Paper Company. Today is August 12th, 1985, and the time is about 10 minutes after 3 in the afternoon. It's a very hot day outside, and really rather muggy, but we're very comfortable in an air-conditioned conference room in an old brick building located at Ethel and Varsity, a building which Marty is refurbishing, hopefully to use in connection with the paper business, which is just a few yards away. Well, to get this interview started, Marty, let me ask first of all some questions about your personal life. Are you a native of Muncie?
No, I'm very close to a native of Muncie. I was born in Fort Wayne, and my family moved here when I was 3 years old. That was when my mother and father started the Schwartz Paper Company on South Walnut Street. And I have been a native since then. So that's 65 years. I guess that makes me pretty authentic.
That makes you almost a native.
Yeah.
Where on South Walnut was the business?
Well, the address is 628. That's the 600 block, South Walnut, and it's right at the railroad, the crossing of what's now Conrail and N&W. In my day, it was the New York Central and the Nickel Plate road.
At what point in time did the business move out here on Tillotson?
We moved out here in 1955. No, 54, I'm sorry. I purchased a property from what was then Ball Brothers and now is Ball Corporation. They had the property that we use. It was known as the Ball West Side Paper Mill. And they manufactured there corrugated cartons for shipping glass jars. In fact, they owned many of this kind of mill.
In 54, was your father still working with the business?
No, my father passed away in March of 41 for Pearl Harbor. So he had long gone.
So you have been president, I would assume, for quite a few years.
Yes,
all of those years.
but when my father passed on, I left Muncie a few months later and went to Washington, where I went to work for the Office of Price Administration. That was more in keeping with my academic training as a political scientist. And I was interested in doing something with what I thought I knew at that time, which wasn't really very much. And then I worked there until, well, I was there when Pearl Harbor happened, and stayed on until, I believe, the end of 42. I fought like hell to get into the Navy, and I remember I had quite a time getting released from everybody, from the government, from my Muncie draft board, which I never could understand because they were getting credit, for the bodies. But they finally did release me, and I was commissioned directly in the Navy, and I quit my job in the OPA on a Friday night, went out and bought a uniform and reported to the Bureau of Ships on Monday morning. That was the extent of my transition from
But you saw
military
overseas
life.
duty.
Oh yeah, I was eventually sent overseas. In fact, in my youthful exuberance to get overseas, I volunteered for something which I learned you never do. And I volunteered. I wanted my own command, have my own ship, and so I volunteered for what was then, or what came to be known as the Murmansk Run. And because I was in the minesweeping section of the Bureau of Ships, And I, in my innocence, thought that would just be thrilling as all hell.
Well, it was pretty heavy duty, wasn't it?
Most of them didn't come back.
Yeah.
Most of the fellows I knew. And then the Navy even went so far as to teach me Russian. And they engaged a white Russian princess. And I remember crawling up to her apartment in Washington 1 or 2 nights a week, because this was a cram course. And I had just been married, and my young bride was very, she thought this princess idea was something, except I said, she was an old lady of 60. And there was really no competition.
Yeah.
But anyway, I learned enough Russian that I could ask for the bathroom or for something to eat or whatever, or pass the ammunition. And then, as they say, the Lord looks out for fools and other people. And I got orders to England. And then I began to find out what happened to minesweepers.
Nice.
And believe me, I was very grateful. Very grateful.
You slipped in something that I ought to go back and pick up. You spoke of your training, meaning your education. Where did you go to school?
Well, I went to school at Harvard College. And I went right out of Muncie Central High School. In those days, they didn't have college boards. Well, they had them, but people out here didn't know anything about them. And I'm quite sure I never would have been able to pass them. But they had an interesting admissions program. Harvard at that time still was pretty much a New England institution in the early 30s. And they were trying to get geographical distribution, so they had a program which most people have never heard of now, because you have to be old to remember it, called the highest seventh. What they said was that if you were in the highest academic rank,
Yes.
1/7 of the boys, see, this was very sexist, of your high school graduating class, you could be admitted directly into Harvard without examination of any kind. And that was a very intelligent thing, because they were trying to pick young men at that time from obscure places in the country that obviously would not have been prepared for that kind of academic rigor. And they recognized there might be bright young fellows around, and there were a lot of fellows admitted that way. But of course, the minute World War II came on, all that dropped out. And it's been forgotten. I don't think I've talked to people who have graduated since, and they look at me and sort of blink and wonder if I am remembering correctly, but I am. They had the highest seventh program.
Well, you were in the service during the 40s. Now, when did you get back? Did you go back to Washington? When did you get back to Muncie?
I didn't, I went directly from the Office of Price Administration into the Navy. And I did not get back to Muncie till, I think it was December of 45 or January of 46. In fact, I think I was still in the Navy. I was home, but I had my last 30 days leave or something, I think about the beginning of 46, and then I started back to work.
Is it about this time that you got involved with Civic Theatre?
Yeah, that's true.
In the late 40s. What was your
Well, now, wait a minute. No, we had been involved. See, Helen and I were married in 1940, in September of 40, and we immediately came to Muncie and started our lives here. And we were in Civic then.
40 and 41.
In 40 and 41 until we left for Washington, because I remember we did a play together. It was Margin for Error, you remember? And Harold Hobbs was in it. He was the German consul, and my wife, who was quite an attractive young person in those days.
Still
I think so. And I played opposite him, and I played the New York Jewish cop. So that was kind of a daring thing in those days, if you remember that. You remember the show, and we hadn't gone to war, and the Nazi business was just coming onto the consciousness of the people.
You were in town during Pearl Harbor?
No, we were in Washington.
You were in Washington at that time?
We left Muncie in August of 41. We were living in Washington.
All right.
Pearl Harbor was December of 41. I remember the Sunday afternoon, and we lived in Virginia across the river in a housing development where young people, newly married people lived.
Well, what I really want to work up to, I suppose, is the year when you were president of the board at Muncie Civic Theatre. Now, first of all, what other experiences did you have before they looked to you for the presidency?
Well, are you talking about theater?
Yes.
Well, I had, of course, done the usual high school things, and then I was very active in theater in college. Now, I was, as I said, I was a political science, what we call a government major. We didn't use the phrase political science. I'd never heard that, I don't think, till I got out.
Yeah.
But I was very much interested in English literature. And I lived in Kirkland House, which had a tradition of doing those sort of bawdy Elizabethan plays, all male, males playing female parts and all that. And the first one we did was 3 hours after marriage, John Gay. I mean, and these are all sort of types, old cuckolded husbands and the young beautiful wives and all that kind of, and then all the mix-up. You get some feeling of Shakespeare in them. We did, one year we did Machiavelli's Mandragola, which I'm sure you know, and which you don't often see performed anymore.
Oh, no. Once in a while you find some university will crank up on that.
Well, it's a typical university type thing, and then we did The Critic.
Yes.
John Gay, or Sheridan. That's right. And those were real, almost professional productions. We did them and each house had its sort of tradition of theater. And ours was very good because the senior tutors in these various houses, we happened to have some very fine 18th century English professors, people who specialized in, and were elegant. We had French, other people, professors, visiting professors, and we had quite a theatrical tradition. I really got into what I would call serious theater there, but that was my only experience. I never had any training or anything, professional training.
But it's something you brought to Muncie, and you gave Muncie and the board the benefit of that experience. And that's really a very valuable thing. When you were president of the board, Marty, and that was 51.
I was trying to, it was about 50.
Well, I called Brian Lau this morning and said, when was Marty Schwartz president?
Good.
He said 51.
God, that's 35 years ago.
That's what I said to Brian. I said, that's 35 years ago. He said, yeah, as a matter of fact, it is. But who do you remember working with when you were president?
Well, Helen Myers, of course, was very active in those days, and she really was, of course, it's interesting that after all these years, am back on civic board, and I gasp, maybe not audibly, but when I see the numbers, and I've been active for the last few months in raising, money for civic here for long-term planning. And when I think of absolutely how poverty-stricken we were, the one thing I remember during my tenure as president was the impossibility of doing things because there simply was no money.
True.
Now, we did, and you remember all that as well as I do. I remember, I think, didn't we begin to acquire or rent that old barn for storage? I know we had problems. Well, number one, everything was at Masonic Temple.
True.
This is all before Civic had its own theater. problems of scheduling, problems of storage, problems of, oh, I remember we had a lot of discussions during my tenure as to whether you ought to pay someone $100 to direct a play.
Yes.
And if you could good buddy a person, I'm remembering names coming to me. Rika Scott Titus, do you remember her?
Yes. I remember the name. I don't remember
You didn't
her.
remember her. She was quite a flamboyant and interesting person.
Well, now, did she direct for Civic Theatre?
Yeah. I thought, well, now don't hold me to this. Now I'm starting to verbalize and reminisce, and I may be mixing up.
Well, we don't have to be. You never want to ruin a good story by sticking to the truth.
All right. Okay, well, I'm not really sure. But I think she lived in Indianapolis and came in for rehearsals. And there was somebody from Newcastle that directed plays. We had a series of problems, but a lot of fun, I remember. Do you have any of the playbills for that year? Do you remember what shows we did?
I couldn't tell you right off, but yes, we do have a number of the playbills, and they will be turned over to the Center for Middletown Studies, or to the Special Collections Room at Bracken Library. We'll be turning those over to them, but right offhand, I couldn't tell you what the shows are.
Well, our problems in those days, as I remember them, my concerns were primarily financial, also identifying interested people who were willing to contribute time. We were more concerned with contribution of time and talent than of money, because nobody expected anybody to do much with money.
When you think of theater productions, let us say in 1950, 51, or around about that time, and compare those productions with the productions you did at Kirkland Hall of Harvard College, how would you compare them in terms of quality?
Oh, well, Civic has always, in my judgment, had some marvelous quality and marvelous moments of what I considered great theater. Now, they've had plenty of lemons and duds and some terrible productions. But what we were doing, you see, again in college wasn't real. Well, that isn't correct. Of course, it was real theater, but it was all avocational. It was not for any credit. It was not for academic excellence or anything. This was fun and games, but we took great pride in the quality of what we did. Of course, our costuming was gorgeous. We did all professional costuming and things like that in those days. Civic obviously was always did significant theater to those people in the community that appreciated significant theater, and they were always very generous in forgiving the sins of amateurishness.
Right. Well, I think people pretty generally are courteous, kind, and pretty generally are going to overlook those little mistakes that occur in amateur theatricals.
Yeah. That's right.
People have told me, Marty, that you're really a very fine performer, and people have wished you'd get back on the stage again. Is that beyond consideration?
No, I don't suppose it's beyond consideration. I think, however, Ed, that as I understand as a sort of peripheral performer and speaker and other things like that, that you have to have your heart and your whole being into doing something like that before it really sounds real. had so many other interests since those times and so many other responsibilities that I guess I haven't thought seriously enough about it. I suppose that if a serious play came by to which I felt I could make a contribution, I might consider it. Gosh, nobody's even asked me for 35 years.
Well, that's what Mayor Jim Carrey said. I asked him to audition once.
Yeah.
And he did. For The Moon is Blue, he auditioned for the Irish father in that.
Yeah.
But then he got angry with me because I didn't invite him to come back. And I just thought he would come back if he were interested in coming back. You spoke of these other interests, Marty. Let's go over some of them. I think I know some of the things you're doing in town. And let me express my admiration for the kinds of things you are doing in town. You've mentioned a couple already, of course. You have to be busy being president of Schwartz Paper Company. You have to be busy also in this business of fundraising for theater renovation down at Civic Theatre. And you were one of those instrumental in seeing to it that so far we have pledged over $263,000. And your part in that, I think, has to be recognized along with a number of other people. I know you also, as a private art collector, I've been in your home and I've seen some very fine artwork there. And you have supported some of the students by purchase of some of their artwork. But what other things occupy your time at the present time? I know the Conversation Club.
Well, you mean Town and Gown
Town and
conversations?
Gown conversation.
I have I don't know if you're aware of this, it was Marie Fraser had a note in the paper over the weekend. You know, Ball State had invited a friend of mine out here to give him an honorary degree next Friday morning. Dr. John William Ward, president of the American Council of Learned Societies, and unfortunately he died tragically about 2 weeks ago. And the provost called me last week and asked if I would accept the honorary Doctor of Laws in his behalf, the posthumous, which I thought was very nice of the university to go ahead with it. It had not occurred to me. I just assumed that the whole matter would be dropped. And so I said I certainly would. Bill Ward, as he preferred to be called, was really more interested in coming to Muncie to look at Ball State than he was to get an honorary degree. And then he really wanted to talk to Town and Gown. He wanted to be part of this Town and Gown conversations. And we had a breakfast lined up for next Thursday morning at Ball Corporation. Well, obviously, that won't happen. But I had talked to him about 2 weeks ago on the phone. I said, Bill, what are you going to talk about? He said, I'm going to talk about individualism. And I said, I know what the words mean, but what does it mean to you? He said, well, I've got a book almost finished on it. And he said, I talked on it in Hungary just last month to a bunch of educators because he said individualism means something very good in America and it means something very bad in most other places in the world. And I had never thought about that, but I talked to his secretary last Friday and I said I was going to accept this honorary degree on his behalf. And could she send me anything on what he had done in Hungary last month? And she sent me, I got it this weekend, his whole paper on individualism, and it's a remarkable document. Just a remarkable, well, obviously I can't read that in the few minutes that I'm going to talk, but I will make reference to it. He was a remarkable man, and I am honored to be able to do something for a man like that.
I think he should be, but it also illustrates, I think, some of the leadership you have shown in the community. You were instrumental in bringing Mr. Ward here, would have been.
Yeah.
But you've been instrumental in doing a number of other things for the community. If you were to point out your participation in the community, what would you single out as giving you the greatest sense of satisfaction?
I suppose in many ways, Ed, I'm a frustrated teacher. You know, I've taught at Ball State off and on up until
In the
about
School
10
of
years
Business.
ago. No, never the
Political
School of
science.
Business. No, history.
All right. Yeah, I knew I'd get it right if you gave me enough guesses.
I'm a better historian than I am, I think, a businessman.
Well, you remember this with feeling of accomplishment or joy. Or
Yeah, these are the things that I'm excited by learning and being part of the learning process for other people. Not that I have so much internal or acquired wisdom, but the process of learning about it. I enjoy, well, last month I was, or at the end of June, I was at the University of Virginia with Bill Ward and putting on a seminar on American perspectives for businessmen, members of the World Business Council, and I happen to be a member. Well, that to me is a very exciting kind of thing, and I'm looking forward to doing some of this at Oxford with Lord Briggs, who has agreed to host a similar meeting. I'd love to do something on the whole problem. I've been working on this in my head for about a year. On the whole problem of Islam in the world. Americans don't know anything.
That's true.
We don't know anything. I don't know. I'm not talking about the problems of the Middle East. I mean, you better understand this is a religion and a group there are more of them than there are Christians in the world. So we better learn something about these people that now are becoming adversarial. Well, and this is the kind of thing. I like to be creative, innovative, and usually the idea of what's in the mind, the life of the mind, is really what fascinates me. You really want to know who I am, where I come from, that's it.
All right.
All the rest of this is fluff.
Well, that's a good place for us to sign off, I think. This is Ed Strother, and I've been talking with Martin Schwartz on August 12th, 1985.